Soon, James was back. He pushed the door of Common Clinic open and walked in. Whitney immediately stood up and greeted, "Hey, James." "MHM." James lightly nodded and looked at Thea, whose eyes were glued to the screen. He walked over there and sat beside her. "Are you all right, Thea?" "Yes." Thea looked at James and pointed at the TV. What's going on?" "G. Gavin's dead." James nodded and said, "I know that the Watsons are influential. Since calling the police wouldn't work, I reported them to the military. The higher-ups took my report seriously, and the Blight King himself led an army to Osmanthus Villa and exterminated them all. Since Gavin resisted arrest, he was killed on the spot. By the way, Maximus is dead too. With him gone, there'll be no one else targeting the Callahans. The Blight King himself." Thea was shocked. "Of course. This is Kensington, which the Blight King holds jurisdiction over. He would not stand idly and watch these wicked people act as they wished." James grabbed Thea's hand and said, "Thea, you have to learn to use legal instruments to protect yourself. There's no single person in Saul that's all-powerful. There will always be an upholder of justice. The Blight King is one of them." "I see." Thea nodded. Immediately, she was reminded of something. "What about my brother?" James said. "He was sent to the hospital. Let me bring you home first. We'll visit him later." Thea did not think much of it. It was all thanks to James that they narrowly escaped death. If not for James' report to the military, she did not dare imagine the consequences. James grabbed Thea's hand and stood up to leave. James." Whitney spoke. James looked at her and asked, "What's the matter?" "Where's Henry?" Whitney asked. She knew Henry had gone to the southern plains. Then, news spread that the Black Dragon fought the 28-nation martial arts gurus at Mt. Thunder Pass and was pursued by a 100,000-strong army. Then, news of the Black Dragon's death came. Though the Black Dragon had returned, Henry had not. She was waiting for an opportunity to ask. James saw the anxious expression on her face and instantly understood. He said, "He's fine. I'll give you a number. Call it." He gave Whitney Daniel's number. After that, he left with Thea. Whitney immediately called Daniel. After the call went through, she asked impatiently, "Hey, James told me you knew about Henry's whereabouts. May I know where he is at the moment?" Daniel did not know who was calling. However, since Whitney mentioned James, he immediately understood. "At the military hospital." "What?" At the military hospital." Whitney's face turned pale. She hurriedly asked, "What happened to him? Come and see for yourself." Daniel did not say much. Whitney hung up the phone and immediately headed to the military hospital. The rest of the Callahans remained in their residence. Lex and the others did not leave. James' parting remarks scared them. As they were present at the scene, they knew that David and Thea had been abducted. They immediately knew it was the Watsons who were behind this. It was their way of getting back at them. At that moment, the TV was broadcasting the news. Upon seeing the news, everyone was dumbfounded. Gavin is dead. Maximus is dead. They could not believe their eyes. The Watsons had only just begun their retaliation. How could they be dead in just an afternoon? Soon, James and Thea returned home. Seeing that Thea was safe, Gladys rushed toward her, crying tears of joy. "Thea, you're fine. Thank goodness. I was just watching the news. They said Maximus and the others had an illegal gathering at Osmanthus Villa. I thought you." "Mom, I'm all right." James reported the incident to the military. "It's all thanks to him that we are fine. By the way, where's Dave? Where's your brother? Where's my husband? Did anything happen to him?" Seeing that David was not there with them, Alyssa burst into tears. "David, how could you leave us just like that? Our child isn't even born yet." "Mom, he's all right. He was injured and sent to the hospital. Let's visit him." Hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they headed straight to the hospital. As David was sent to the hospital early, his operation was already over. He lay on the bed in the special ward and looked at the ceiling, daydreaming. Today's incident had been too shocking. He thought it was the end for him. He was prepared to die. However, James appeared at the last moment and saved his life. He did not expect James to be the Black Dragon. If he was the Black Dragon, who was the James of Majestic Corporation? Ads by Pub Future. His head was spinning. However, James finished off hundreds of men with ease while carrying him in his arms. In the end, when the Blight King showed himself, James was even fraternizing with him. Who was he if not the Black Dragon? He could not figure it out. Since James was so powerful and influential, why would he marry into the Callahans? Why was he willing to be ordered around? He reminisced everything that had happened in the household. The mysterious Mr. Caden seemed to be behind the scenes helping them out. Now that he thought about it, there was never a mysterious Mr. Caden in the first place. It was James all along. It was the son-in-law of the Callahans and his brother-in-law. David was deep in thought. Soon, the door was pushed open. A few people walked in. It was the Callahans who had hurried over. David, how are you doing? Upon entering the ward, Alyssa immediately rushed toward him. Seeing he was wrapped in bandages all over his body, she burst into tears. David slowly moved his head. Seeing James at the back, he felt shivers down his spine. He had thought that James was useless, and he had treated him badly. Will he exact revenge on me? David could not help but worry. Thea walked over and asked, concerned, is everything all right? I'm fine. David was a little nervous. James said, his injuries are rather serious. He needs rest. Let's not bother him any further. The hospital has nurses to take care of him. Yes, he's right. David immediately said, Dad, Mom, Grandpa, Alyssa, and Thea. Go home. I won't die. I'll be back home after some rest. Seeing that he was conscious, the Callahans were at ease. They returned home. At the Callahan residence, in Thea's room, Thea sat on the bed and said apologetically in a low voice, I'm sorry, honey. I've troubled you. James lightly waved. It's not about the trouble. Do you know why I'm mad at you? Thea shook her head. I'm mad because you didn't tell me anything even though I'm your husband. Why did you have to beg someone else for help? Was that really necessary? Thea hung her head and remained silent. She had wanted to confide in James. However, knowing that James was without power and money, she chose not to. I won't make the same mistake in the future, she said in a low voice. If anything happens, you'll be the first to know. That's more like it, James said. We're husband and wife. Though I'm your husband, you didn't utter a single word of the situation to me. Instead, you ran off to a stranger. Thea was like a child being lectured. She kept nodding her head. James patted her back and consoled her. All right, now, it's all in the past. It's getting late. We should get some sleep after showering. Honey, Thea suddenly lifted her head. James looked at her. Before Thea could even say anything, she felt her cheeks redden. Let's shower together. Thea's mind was clear after all she had experienced. She loved James. James had a place in her heart. She remembered how James treated her injuries. She remembered James' meticulous care and attention toward her. She suggested they showered together. She wanted James to be her first. James looked at Thea in a daze. Then, he grinned mischievously and asked, Is that so? You better think again. I'm not forcing you. If you don't want to, then so be it. Thea blushed and made her way to the bathroom. James scratched his nose. He wanted to make a move on her. However, now was not the time. He still had business to deal with. Besides, he had not held a wedding ceremony with Thea yet. He planned to officially marry her after dealing with everything. It would be a grand wedding ceremony, the envy of all. Only then would he have his first with Thea. Thea went to shower. Soon, she was done. Wrapped in a towel, her hair was wet and water droplets were dripping from it. Honey, Could you help me blow dry my hair? Ads by Pub Future. Sure. James was all for it. After the incident, he felt a change in Thea's feelings and attitude toward him. She had never asked him to help blow dry her hair. It was out of character for her. However, here she was asking him. Thea sat in front of the dressing mirror. James walked over to her and used the hairdryer to dry her hair. The scene was both romantic and heartwarming. Honey, we're broke. Thea's reddened cheeks were overshadowed by the poignant look on her face. My brother took $500 million from my bank account. The Zenoses demanded I return the money and even prosecuted me in court. The villa and everything worth something have been confiscated by the court. The money in Pacific Group has been used to pay back the Zenoses. It's all right, James said with an unconcerned look, take it slow. You'll make a comeback. The medical conference is just around the corner. I'll make you the new Asclepius of our generation and spread your name far and wide. There's no need to worry about money once you're famous. James was completely unconcerned about the money. Although his journey to the southern plains was a treacherous one, he received a large amount of war reparation. Although the vast majority of it was given to the Black Dragon Army, he received $1 trillion himself. It was enough to get a ton of things done. He was unafraid of the likes of the Five Provinces Business Alliance, Oceanic Commerce, and Infinite Commerce. $1 trillion should be enough to get them to toe the line. Soon, Thea's hair was dried. Thea stood up and flipped her long, black hair. The aroma of shampoo tickled James' nostrils. She stood up and pushed James into the bathroom. Go and shower now. Okay. James went to shower. When he came out of the bathroom, Thea was already on the bed. He followed suit. The moment he got on the bed, Thea reached out and hugged him. She was naked. Her skin came into contact with James. James could feel her warmth and the tenderness of her breasts. Honey. He opened his mouth to speak, but as he was nervous, he stammered. James, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Thea hugged James and apologized non-stop. It's all in the past. There's no need to apologize. James could no longer suppress his desires. He turned to look at Thea. Thea blushed and closed her eyes. James could see her fluttering eyelashes. Thea waited for around 30 seconds. Sensing that James was being passive, she opened her eyes. She was met with a familiar face. She plucked up the courage and pounced on James. She kissed him. Their lips touched. They kissed. Then, they hugged. Knock, knock, knock. Suddenly, knocks came from the door. As if they were doing something wrong, they jumped with alarm and ran free of each other immediately. James cleared his throat. Who is it? He was displeased. Who was it knocking on the door? How rude. I almost heard it. How dare they interrupt me? Gladys' voice came from the door. She shouted, open the door. Lex is calling for a family meeting. He's demanding everyone join. In the middle of the night. Come on. James was displeased. Thea, on the other hand, was already dressed. She was quick. She had gotten dressed before James could even react. Blushing, she smiled at James. Maybe next time. What else could James say? Next time, then. He put on his clothes. After getting dressed, they walked out of the room. What took you two so long? Gladys was annoyed. Suddenly, she noticed something. Ads by Pub Future. She stared at Thea and saw that her cheeks were red. She understood with a single glimpse what had happened in the room. She swiftly dragged Thea aside and whispered, Thea, did you do it with that piece of trash? Huh? Thea panicked. She felt as if she had done something wrong and was getting exposed. Embarrassed, she hung her head. She did not know what to say. You. Enraged, Gladys rebuked her. What did I tell you? Why won't you listen? What are you dilly-dallying for? Don't we have a family meeting to attend? Let's get going. As James' plan had been ruined, he was displeased. Thea hurriedly made her way to the door. That girl. Gladys crossed her arms. Benjamin looked at James and said, let's go. They headed toward the Clahans' villa. Along the way, Gladys kept reprimanding Thea. She knew Thea had not slept with James and was still a virgin. She had also been secretly reminding her not to sleep with James. That way, after divorcing James, she would have the right to marry into a powerful family. Once she slept with someone, she would be an undesirable second-hand product. She never expected her to. She kept scolding Thea. Thea remained silent. She was replaying the earlier scene in her head. When she kissed James and when James tightly embraced her in his arms, she felt a jolt of electricity passing through her body. She felt like she was floating on air. She relished that feeling. She was infatuated with that feeling. Thinking about this, she could not help but grin. Soon, they reached the Clahans' villa. Many important members of the family were already present. Howard's and John's families were present. Thea and her family walked in. Everyone turned to look at them. Immediately, the sarcastic remarks came. Dilly-dallying all day long. Always the last to arrive, I see. The one who uttered those remarks was Audrey Catalina, Howard's wife. All this while, Audrey was able to lift her head high with her mother's family as her husband was the chairman. However, because of Thea, the Callahans were now faced with bankruptcy. She utterly despised Thea. Mom, stop it. Weston pulled at Audrey. Lex sat on the sofa and smoked his cigar. Seeing that everyone was present, he spoke, our family is in a deep crisis. I've called you all here today not to shift the blame on anyone but to think of a way to resolve the crisis. Lex's voice was clear and crisp. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Thea. Tommy said coldly, all thanks to Thea, I suppose. This only happened because she crossed the Watsons and humiliated them. That's why they're exacting their revenge on us. That's right. Because of Thea, all medical corporations have ceased cooperation with us. All our contracts have been cancelled. Grandpa, Thea's a jinx. The Callahans will never enjoy peace with her here. Let's kick her out of the family. Even if we kick her out, she'll still have to pay her dues. The Callahans spoke. Thea did not understand the situation the Callahans were in. She only knew that Pacific Group was doomed. She had no capital left to kickstart new operations. She asked, Grandpa, how's Eternality doing at the moment? Lex raised his eyebrow and glanced at her. What? You dare ask? You humiliated the Watsons, and now they're targeting us. Celestial Group and Longevity Pharmaceuticals have already terminated their contracts with us. Not only that, they're now suing us by saying there are quality concerns with our products. Eternality has been sealed off. The banks are demanding we repay our loans. All businesses under the Callahans have stopped. We now owe hundreds of millions of dollars. Hearing this, Thea's face darkened. She never expected the situation to be so grim. What should we do now? Lex looked at the crowd. They had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. For decades, Lex had strived to make the Callahans a well-to-do family. Yet, after finally accumulating billions of dollars worth of assets, they had lost everything. He was 80 years of age. He was tired. He no longer wanted to care. He had summoned everyone to figure out a solution. If none could be found, he would declare bankruptcy. Everyone remained silent. The Watsons were all on the move. Celestial Group and Longevity Pharmaceuticals were on the Watsons' side. It would be impossible for the Callahans to stand against their combined forces. Seeing that everyone was silent, Lex took a deep breath. Then, he stood up while leaning on his cane. Since no one has any ideas, we'll declare bankruptcy. I'm old. It's time I rest. You are all free to do as you wish. Ads by Pub Future. Lex did not rebuke Thea. He knew it would amount to nothing. This was fate. It was preordained. It was the Clahans' fate. I'm old. I'm getting old. Supporting himself with his cane, Lex headed upstairs. In that instant, he seemed to have aged even more. Upon witnessing the scene, James frowned. All this while, he thought of Lex as an imposing and commanding man. Even though he was 80 years of age, there was this vitality within him. He had this pioneering spirit that made him look young and energetic. However, all of that energy had disappeared in an instant. Now, he was just an old man nearing the end of his life. There's still hope. James spoke. His voice was loud and clear. Everyone turned to look at him. Lex stopped in his tracks and turned. James saw in Lex's eyes a glimmer of hope. Thea gently pulled at James, hinting at him to stop. The Callahans were now in dire straits. Eternality had been sealed off. Their capital chain was broken. They were in a lot of debt. What hope was he talking about? Under everyone's watchful gaze, James continued, "From what I've heard, the Transgenerational Group has an investment company as its subsidiary. We can draw investments from them. As long as they're willing to invest in us, Eternality will be able to avert this crisis." Upon hearing this, Lex's hopes were dashed. Howard stared at James coldly and said, "So what if you know about this? Now that Eternality has been sealed off and we shoulder hundreds of millions worth of debt, why would Transgenerational invest in us?" John mocked, "Kid, do you have any idea what situation Eternality's in right now? We need at least 500 million to kickstart everything. Besides, Eternality currently has no prospects. Why would anyone invest hundreds of millions in us? Trash will always be trash. Stop running your mouth if you don't know anything about investment. If not for this piece of trash, Thea wouldn't have broken off her engagement. The Callahans wouldn't have to suffer such consequences." The moment James spoke, the Callahans went into an enraged frenzy. They blamed everything on him. "If I say it's possible, it's possible," James continued nonchalantly. "After all, how do we know it won't work if we don't at least try?" "All right." Lex stared at James and said, "James, if you can draw investment from Transgenerational and revive the business operations of the Callahans, I promise you this. From today onward, no one else will ever demand you to divorce Thea. I, Lex Callahan, will officially acknowledge you as my grandson-in-law." "I'll try." James nodded. Thea's face darkened. James was being overly ambitious again. There was no way to save the Callahans' businesses. They would need at least hundreds of millions. Before any investment company invested, they would launch a series of investigations and conduct a risk evaluation. They would gain no returns if they invested in the Callahans. Unless, of course, they took over Eternality with hundreds of millions. Eternality still had a value worth several $100 million. However, the Callahans owed hundreds of millions of dollars, and selling off the company would merely be enough to repay the debts. Bankruptcy and becoming an ordinary household were inevitable. "Honey, do you really have a way to attract investments?" Thea glanced at James doubtfully. James nodded lightly. Attracting investments was a cinch for him. James felt sympathy for Lex and could not bear to see his lifetime effort go down the drain like this. Lex was stubborn because of his obsession. It was his dream to lead the Callahans into glory. In order to achieve his dreams, he was still struggling at such old age when he should be enjoying the rest of his life. Instead, he was still working hard for the family. Additionally, he had a bottom line for doing things. Otherwise, there would be no such thing as household rules enforcing the family members to use down-to-earth methods and not dirty tricks in business. Since James is confident in attracting investments, we'll leave this to him. However, I have to warn you, James. You'll have to get out of our family if you fail to do so, said Howard. Dad, do you really trust that piece of trash, James? Let's just try to solve it as soon as possible through our connections or see if anyone can find someone who is connected to the Watsons. Then, we'll ask them to help plead with the Watsons to spare our family. Ads by Pub Future. Gavin is dead, and we don't know who's currently in charge of the Watsons, so how are we going to use any connections? The Callahans gathered worriedly and discussed the matter together. Some wanted to bet their hopes on James because the Callahans had no other choice. Some were unwilling to let the Callahans end like this and wanted to devise another plan. Lex, on the other hand, did not say much and simply went upstairs with his cane. At the moment, he was a little hunched and looked to be going through a vicissitude. After Lex left, Gladys touched her nose, puzzled. Did the old man's personality change today? He didn't scold Thea. She knew Lex's character very well. Thea had caused so much trouble for the Callahans, and according to Lex's usual self, he should have been furious, wanting to expel Thea from the family. Yet, there was not a single word of blame. Let's go back, Thea. James pulled Thea to leave. After leaving the Callahans' villa, Thea asked out of curiosity, "Honey, do you have any means of attracting investments?" The current state of the Callahans was her fault. She felt guilty and blamed herself for it. Thus, it would be great if James could attract investments. James said with a faint smile, "The medical conference is in a few days. Medical practitioners from all over the globe will be gathering at Medical Street. This is a grand event in Kensington equivalent to a national event. Wouldn't it be easy to attract investments if we could stand out at the medical conference and earn the title of the world's #1 genius doctor?" With James' capabilities, it was a piece of cake for him to rescue the Callahans with a few $100 million. However, he did not want to simply give them the money. Another way to solve their problems was to seek out the new Watson's head when he was appointed. Still, James felt that the Callahans were too power-hungry and needed a lesson that allowed them to experience the ups and downs in life. Only then would they unite as a family in the future. After all, the Callahans were Thea's family, and he also hoped that they could live in harmony. "All right." Thea gave a simple reply and said nothing more. The family went back home together. It was already 1 in the morning by the time they got home. At home, James looked at Thea pleadingly. "Thea, let's do it again." Thea blushed and said angrily, Do what? It's time for bed." "Fine," James replied, disappointed. The night passed silently. The next day, James woke up early. After breakfast, the family headed to the hospital to visit David. After a night of rest, David's mental state improved a lot. However, it would take longer for him to recover completely. Additionally, the doctor mentioned that whether he could get out of bed and walk in the future depended on his recovery. He would have to spend his life in a wheelchair if he recovered poorly. Inside the ward, Alyssa was bawling her eyes out. David tried to comfort her. "Babe, why are you crying? Let's look on the bright side. It's already a miracle that I survived." Single quote. After going through life and death, David reflected on himself and said remorsefully, "It's my fault, and I can only blame myself for it." He glanced at James while speaking with gratitude on his face. James, I'm really grateful to you this time. I would be dead in the morgue right now if it weren't for you." James was delighted to hear David finally address him by his name, and he subconsciously straightened his body. After going through that experience, this kid finally reflected on himself, thought James. "Move aside. Let me check on him." James walked toward the hospital bed. Alyssa stood up immediately with a face covered in tears. James examined David's legs and hands, then his whole body. David just had surgery, and as the doctor said, whether he could recover and get out of bed to walk in the future depended on his own body's recovery ability. After the examination, he said with a smile, "You're good and will definitely recover. I'll prescribe a formula later. Alyssa can go pick up the medicine and decoct it for you. You'll recover if you take it according to the course of treatment." David was delighted to hear this. He knew that James was the Black Dragon. Ads by Pub Future. The Black Dragon was unparalleled in strength and had unmatched medical skills worldwide. He had witnessed James' strength and medical skills. During Eternality's last crisis, James easily resolved it with his medical skills. Thank you, James." David urged Alyssa, "Babe, you should also thank James." Alyssa glanced at James and snorted. Thank him. David wouldn't have got injured if it weren't for James, thought Alyssa. What's with your attitude? I'm warning you. You better stop making faces when you see James in the future. Treat him respectfully. Understand? David was dissatisfied and immediately reprimanded her. Forget it. You are injured, so don't anger yourself, James said as he waved his hands. Thank you for the generosity, James. David was grateful. David's attitude made Thea puzzled. What's going on here? David always made things difficult for James in every possible way and insulted him whenever he had the chance. Why is he suddenly being so respectful? He's even addressing him as James now, thought Thea. You must be busy, James. You should go back and do what you need to be doing. David felt uncomfortable with James around. Should we go back first, Thea? You go back to the company first. I don't have much to do, so I'll accompany David a little longer, said Thea. James touched his chin. Go back to the company. Which company am I going to? My job in the transgenerational group is just a nominal position, thought James. Then I'll make my leave first. James did not say anything more and left after bidding farewell. He had to visit Henry's physical condition in the military hospital. He walked out of the ward, left the hospital, and drove directly to the military hospital. Military hospital, intensive care unit. Henry was lying in a hospital bed. He had a ventilator on, many wires attached to his body, and many medical instruments by the bedside. A young woman sat beside the hospital bed and absent-mindedly glanced at the unconscious Henry. James walked over. Whitney stood up and greeted immediately, James. James waved his hand. He looked at the medical device. Henry's vital signs were very stable. However, James did not fully trust these high-tech devices. He had more trust in himself. Thus, he gave Henry a pulse diagnosis. Afterward, he prescribed a formula and instructed someone to pick up the necessary medicine and decoct it according to the method written with the formula. Henry's condition had already stabilized. Now, everything was up to his body to heal itself. The human body was very complex and had an exceptional function, self-healing. In theory, no matter how severe the injuries sustained, the body would repair itself. However, there was also a limit, and exceeding this limit would cause the body's self-healing ability to be lost. Knowledge about this aspect was recorded in the medical book that James had obtained. The body's self-repairing ability could be accelerated with medicine to stimulate the body's various organs, cells, and blood. James, is Henry all right? He will wake up, right? Whitney eagerly looked at James. He'll be all right. He can't die even if he wanted to with me here, so don't worry. James nodded. Whitney was relieved to hear James' words. After James had prescribed the formula, he stayed in the hospital to accompany Henry for a long time. Near lunchtime, James instructed the doctor to pay close attention to Henry's physical condition and to inform him as soon as something was wrong. Then, he left the military hospital. At the same time, military region, the Blythe King's office. The Blythe King was in his military uniform, sitting on a sofa. Ads by Pub Future. Opposite him was a man in his 30s. The man had a diamond-shaped face with short hair and was dressed in a clean suit. He tapped the table with his fingers, making a rhythmic melody. Blythe King, you are going too far. The man opened his mouth and reproached. The Blythe King glanced at the uninvited guest and replied calmly, I'm unsure what you're referring to, Leroy. The man sitting opposite him was Leroy Tucker, a high-ranking official in the capital. He was not in the military but in politics. His status was extremely high and on par with the 5 commanders. Leroy straightforwardly explained the meaning of his words. James has already resigned and is no longer the Black Dragon, nor is he one of the 5 commanders. Yet, you choose to help James. Are you not aware that many people want him dead? The Blythe King glanced at Leroy and said, I'm afraid I'm not aware. Do you want him dead? Although he resigned, he had made countless military contributions and guarded the southern plains for many years. He is the military god of Saul. Plus, he still holds the blade of justice. Despite his resignation, his authority is much more powerful than when he was on the job. Slam. Leroy's face darkened, and he slammed the table. He said furiously, "Blythe King, I am warning you not to interfere with James' affairs. Don't bring it upon yourself, or else no one will be able to save you." Presumptuous. The Blythe King also had a short temper. Thus, he was infuriated as soon as the other party provoked him. He shouted, "This is Kensington, Leroy. I have the final say in this place." "Very well." Leroy glared at the Blythe King and turned to leave without another word. After he left, the Blythe King sat down. The words James said to him yesterday were still vivid in his mind. He never expected someone to come knocking on his door so soon. Leroy was a high-ranking official in the capital's political factions. He was the chief executive and commanded hundreds of officials. It could be said that he had authority over tens of thousands of people. Leroy had personally visited him to warn him not to interfere with James' affairs. It seems Kensington is already in a mess. The Blythe King wore a serious expression. Not long after Leroy left, another person came to visit him. "Haha, Blythe King, it sure is hard to see you. I was stopped right at the entrance." A burst of laughter resounded. Seeing the visitor, the Blythe King's expression darkened again. The uninvited visitor was dressed in a black jacket, a black duckbill hat, and sunglasses. "Emperor, why are you in Kensington?" the Blythe King asked solemnly as he looked at the person who appeared in his office. The visitor was none other than the Emperor of the capital, who was also the head of the 5 commanders. He was also Saul's marshal, giving him authority over all the military troops. Although the Blythe King was currently the commander-in-chief of the 5 armies, he would have to dispatch the military armies at the order of the emperor. However, the emperor was unable to touch the Black Dragon army. The Black Dragon army was a special existence. They were not a domestic army but an army that guarded the borders. The Black Dragon army obeyed only the Black Dragon. After the previous Black Dragon died, the Black Dragon army remained without a commander until James' achievements allowed him to rise and claim the position as the new commander. The emperor approached, sat on the sofa, and crossed his legs. He glanced at the Blythe King with a dim expression but said with a smile, "Why not? Does the Blythe King not welcome me?" "Not at all." The Blythe King's expression softened, and he asked with a smile, "You are in charge of countless things and must be busy. I was curious why you would leave the capital and come to Kensington." The emperor replied with a smile, "Well, Kensington's medical conference is happening very soon, and since the borders are peaceful now, I've given myself a 2-week vacation. I wanted to visit Kensington and see Saul's grand annual event. Also, I wanted to meet a few old friends while I'm here." Although the emperor said so, the Blythe King knew he was not in Kensington for fun. He remained silent on the sofa. The emperor continued to speak, "By the way, I heard that the Black Dragon didn't die and appeared in Kensington as the son-in-law of the Callahans. Last night, he called you to privately send troops to help him solve some trouble." "I didn't send troops to help him solve personal problems. I received a report that there was a criminal gang gathering." The Blythe King corrected him. "You are overstepping your boundaries. You are the commander-in-chief of the 5 armies. These are matters of the local police forces. I hope you remain within your jurisdiction and don't act recklessly. Otherwise, it'll be a serious crime that might even threaten your position." The Blythe King understood that the emperor was here to criticize his actions. It was because he helped James. Faced with the emperor's questioning, the Blythe King replied calmly, "Police forces. Do they dare to get involved in the 5 provinces' business alliances affairs? The alliance has almost absolute authority throughout the 5 provinces. I didn't investigate thoroughly and had already given those bigwigs enough face. Blythe King, the situation has changed now. I hope you're smart enough to recognize the best side to be on right now." The emperor did not say anything more. He picked up his hat on the table, stood up, and left after giving a warning. Ads by Pub Future. After the Emperor left, the Blight King took out his phone and called James. Where are you? Just left the military hospital. What's wrong? Wait there. I'll come to see you right away. The Blight King hung up the phone, dressed in casual clothes, and headed out. James waited at the entrance of the military hospital. About 20 minutes later, an ordinary vehicle appeared in front of James. The window rolled down, and the Blight King waved to him. Get in. James got into the car. The Blight King took out a cigarette and passed it to James. James took it and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" The Blight King said solemnly, "Some people came knocking on my door today." "Oh, who was it?" James was intrigued and immediately asked. "Chief Executive Leroy and the Emperor." James smiled. This was exactly what he predicted would happen. The Blight King continued. "These two people are representatives from the military and government. They both warned me not to interfere with your affairs." "Yeah, it's expected. From now on, you shouldn't get involved with me anymore," said James. "I'm just puzzled. Why didn't they take action against you before your resignation? Now that you've resigned, they're coming after you relentlessly." The Blight King could not understand. James glanced at the Blight King and said, "I really don't know how you became one of the 5 commanders. You can't even grasp such simple truth. You should slowly try to digest it and you'll eventually understand," James replied. Then, he opened the door and got out of the car. The Blight King sat in the back seat and smoked his cigarette. He pondered upon James, Leroy, and the Emperor's words. He was a soldier and was full of fighting spirit. Thus, he was not used to wheels and deals, nor had he thought about political affairs. He had always completed his duties and contributed to the country's development. However, he was not stupid. He could figure it out if he thought about it thoroughly. He thought about the special nature of the Black Dragon Army. The Black Dragon Army was established 30 years ago. It was an independent army outside the jurisdiction of any military region. It had great authority, and all the Black Dragons would inherit the Blade of Justice. The Blight King thought about the death of the previous Black Dragon. It happened 10 years ago. The first commander of the Black Dragon Army was killed during a battle 10 years ago, and all the forces within Saul were quickly reshuffled. Upon remembering this matter, the Blight King immediately understood. James was right. It was essential to stand on the right side. He also understood which sides James was referring to previously. James returned home. At the same time, in a private room of a newly opened restaurant on the transgenerational New City Food Street, Quincy glanced at Thea and asked, "What happened last night, Thea? Why did Gavin suddenly die? How come Xavier got beaten up to the point of being hospitalized?" "I inquired about it and heard that all his bones had been broken. Plus, his manhood." Quincy paused momentarily and whispered, "He's no longer capable of reproduction." "Huh? Is this real? Who did you hear it from? Is the news accurate?" Thea was stunned and asked. "It's definitely accurate. Someone from the Watsons spread it." I don't know." Thea was slightly puzzled. She knew James beat up Xavier during the day but was unsure what happened to him at night. All she knew was that James made a report, and the Blight King sent troops. Afterward, Gavin resisted the arrest and was shot to death. "Don't lie to me, Thea. I heard the Watsons sent people to kidnap you and David. Even the military was dispatched." "I really have no idea, Quincy. I was indeed kidnapped. However, James made a report, and the Blight King sent troops. I'm really unaware of what happened next." "Your husband, James." "Why yeah." Thea nodded. Quincy said incredulously, "He is a useless piece of trash. How could he possibly have the contacts to make a report to the military? Plus, this is such a trivial matter. How could he get the Blight King to handle it personally?" Thea shook her head. "I don't know." Ads by Pub Future. Thea refused to continue to dwell on this issue, So she quickly changed the subject and asked, "By the way, it's rumored that the Black Dragon is dead. Is the news real?" Hearing this, Quincy's face turned pale. The chairman of Majestic Corporation, James, was the Black Dragon and also her ex-boyfriend. She had been attached to him all these years. Quincy sighed softly. "Maybe this is our fate. He and I are destined not to be together. I'm sorry, Quincy. I really have nothing to do with him. Unlike the rumors, I've never slept with him." "Is that so?" Quincy did not believe Thea's words at all. She was a woman who trusted her instincts. Some time ago, she witnessed the way James looked at Thea at the Majestic Corporation entrance. His eyes were obviously full of love for her. "Forget it. He's already dead. We shouldn't bring up these sad things anymore. We can't let a man affect our friendship. The dead should rest in peace, and the living should try to live to the fullest. By the way, I'm organizing a high school reunion party tonight. Let's go together. It's been so many years since I saw our old classmate. I'll pass." Thea shook her head. So many things happened recently, and the Callahans were faced with a bankruptcy crisis. Thea had no mood to be going to a party. "I used my connections to invite Kian to perform at the party. Plus, I invited James' old classmate. After the party, a monument will be erected for him in the suburbs to send him off." Hearing this, Thea was tempted to go. Kian was her idol, and she really liked his songs. Plus, how could she miss out on sending the Black Dragon, James, on his last ride? The Black Dragon, James, had helped her a lot in the past. After thinking about it for a while, Thea nodded, "All right. The Venus is a Dragon Fountain Villa. After the party tonight, we will rest at the villa for the night and erect the monument for James tomorrow." While speaking, Quincy suddenly felt awkward. She quickly corrected herself. "I mean the Black Dragon, James, and not your useless husband, James." Thea smiled since she did not take it to heart. "By the way, can I bring a +1? Huh?" Quincy frowned. The reunion party did indeed permit family members to come along. However, she did not want Thea to bring James to the party. She had already found Thea a suitable boyfriend among her classmates. Although he was not as good as Xavier, he was 100 times better than the useless James. After thinking about it, Quincy replied, "You can bring one if you want." "Thanks," Thea said with a smile. After agreeing to attend the party, Thea went home. When Thea returned home, James was already home. "Honey, I've something to tell you." "Sure, go ahead." "Quincy organized a high school reunion party, and I'm planning to go," said Thea. "All right, have fun. Also,